Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is now firing back at her critics who put up this billboard in Times Square accusing her of costing New York thousands of jobs and economic opportunity by driving away Amazon's second headquarters. AOC tweeting out today, few things effectively communicate the power we built in fighting dark money and anti-worker policies like billionaire-funded groups blowing tons of cash on WACK billboards. This one is funded by the Mercers. P.S. Fact that it's in Times Square tells you this isn't for or by New Yorkers. And now the JCN is putting up two new billboards. This one says, hey, AOC, saw your WACK tweak, but while the Congresswoman accuses her critics of being out of touch, a Siena poll showed that nearly 60% of New Yorkers approved of Amazon's plan. So who's really out of touch? What do you think, gang?
I'll tell you what this reminds me of, I remember seeing a parade by one of the unions a few years ago, and they were pretty much yelling at everyone on the sidewalk, this is a blue state, and I'm thinking, oh, does that mean I have to leave? What does this all mean here? And, to say that, I didn't realize this was a homogeneous place. There's diverse opinions here, and while I appreciate the Congresswoman's opinions here, I think it's way off. She's calling the Mercers anti-progressive. Maybe it's more like anti-Luddite and anti-doing things that are actually going to be proactive rather than sitting here and complaining about it and pushing things away that could be helpful and working with ways to be helpful. That's what I don't get here. It's misguided. I'm not exactly a Mercer advocate or anything like that, if you know me. But, to me, this is just completely misguided. And it's like, well, you want to defeat this sort of thinking? Give her enough rope, shine a light, let her keep talking. Go ahead.
All right. Well, just for the record, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is such catnip right now for media attention.
That's a great word.
She is to the left, or to the media world on the left, what Donald Trump was to the right a few years ago. And while she, attracts attention, it bears remembering she is a junior congresswoman from New York City. She is not in the leadership. She is not.
She's on some pretty powerful committees.
But, she is not the head of a committee. She is a vote. I'm not saying that is an insignificant thing. And she has a lot of Twitter followers, so she gets to shape the dialogue. And there were a lot of grassroots opposition to Amazon, which I'm on record, I think was a mistake. I think it'll be bad for Amazon. I think it will be bad for the city. But it certainly wasn't just her. There was a whole progressive movement behind this that is a problem, irrespective of whether or not we pay attention to her. A problem in the sense of, it's a zero-sum attitude toward economic development. The jobs are not going to come from nowhere.
But here's the thing. She is not willing to take responsibility for something that has really damaged New York City. And it's time that she's owning up to the fact that this was bad politics, bad policy, and it's bad for New Yorkers. If she can't stand a billboard coming back at her, then get out of the kitchen, girl, because guess what? She has sought this limelight.
Right.
She has won the limelight through being telegenic and being out there and having good social media presence. She has to live with that.
Liz, first of all, I wish it was just telegenetic. This woman, first of all, she just won this Twitter war. Let's not pretending this company with
I'm
the
not
billboard.
saying otherwise.
She called this billboard wickety wickety whack because the tippy tops are paying for it. You know what? People are going to believe that because basically this group was paid for by billionaires who founded it. Now, they're right, and what they're saying is right, but this is where the right has to be careful here. You can't prove to people, her fans, from the top down, like some trickle-down thing, that high minimum wages are bad, that all these policies are bad for you, the worker. The employer can't tell you that. The workers have to think that. And she exposed this, and unfortunately is going to win people onto her side from this battle. This company, this entity will probably have to change their name. She's a very dangerous fighter. That's why I think Trump doesn't engage her directly. She's much smarter at this than Warren and Bernie, who she used to work for, essentially. Bernie, she wins these Twitter battles. She's not right economically. She's not helping the people, but she is making better points. She is stronger. She's commanding the media presence. It's not just because she looks good. This is not the Sarah Palin of the left-wing party.
But Jonas,
this is the Donald Trump of the
left-wing party. The one thing I would say is, point out, is that all the polls that were done right up until a couple of weeks ago showed that New Yorkers wanted Amazon to be here. They realized not only it'd be good for the community, but it's good for state tax revenues, too. I mean, just the income that the state would make on the 25,000 workers adds up to $5 billion over 10 years. Governor Cuomo knows that, and I think the people of New York do as well.
And again, I mean, it's not.
Watch, a few weeks from now, these numbers are going to start changing. She's going to start winning. That's like saying the Republican Party 20 years ago, more of them were for immigration. Those numbers have changed because of strong politicians changing what people think about certain issues, free trade, whatever it is. That's what she can do about socialism on the left. She's, I think, that powerful.
I would agree. I mean, and you make really good points about just this is a potent social media presence that can translate into influence and some degree of political power, as we saw from Donald Trump. But look, we talked a lot about this with Amazon a few weeks ago. Amazon also just packed up and left. I mean, there was enough support within those communities that if they had really been committed to engaging, and the fact is Bezos, as we talked about with his own issues with the Inquirer, is not somebody who particularly wants to engage adversaries. He either wants an open arms or he says, we'll just go somewhere else. So there was enough support there that had he engaged, it's likely the outcome would have been different. It's not just like Amazon was, defeated, tail between their legs. It's much more that they said, we're
okay,
it's not worth it.
But I want to come back to the fact that this is the first time that this young woman who kind of shoots from the hip and has soared to everyone's consciousness sort of overnight has kind of come up against a real issue where she's in the wrong place, according to most of the people whose lives might have been impacted, and also by fellow Democrats.
Right.
So the fact that, she's having a Twitter battle, donors, I totally disagree with you. Take her on. I mean, if she's wrong about something, are we supposed to ignore that and sort of be cowed by 9 million Twitter followers?
Liz,
I don't think so.
See, you sound exactly like what people said about Donald Trump at the early stages, that he
and
was
look how well he did.
He was saying crazy things that you can't say about being a hero. He was wrong. He was saying things like, I'll pay off the debt in 8 years. We know that was not true, but the fact is people started to believe in the message, and he got elected, and the other person he was against was very weak. This woman is doing that. She's not making sense from pure economic point of view. That's not the point. The point is she's going to shift the needle.
So how do you think you should counter her? I mean, just ignore her, or... I think it's important to engage.
By the way, what you're looking at right there is one of the other newest billboards. It says, "Hey, AOC, this billboard costs about $4,000, but you just cost New York 25,000 jobs and $4 billion in annual lost wages." Ouch. I think this is going to have an impact.
I do,
and that's
too.
the point here. That's the point here. We're in a situation now where no one won. New York City lost. We don't know what would have happened with this, and we're never going to find out unless... again, I actually appreciate that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez has a different voice. Yeah. I can respect that. But how about if she was actually extending the olive branch, reaching out to companies like this who could be potential employers and say, hey, here's how you could help the community. Here's how you could invest in schools, invest in the community, preserve the community, work with us.
Right.
That's
She'd have to believe in capitalism,
that's a real progressive thing.
And she's a socialist. I mean, that's the bottom line here.
Everyone wants a better life. Call it whatever you want. Socialism, capitalism, blend the two. She needs to label everything. That's her political shtick for right now. It's going to get old, just like the other side gets old, just saying no to everything. That's it.
I don't know how you blend two polar opposites, though. That's a problem. We got to move on, gang.
Like in the words of Homer Simpson, doom.
Yeah.
Because it really was kind of one of those moments. I mean, when we really think about what happened here, I mean, she thought that there was a $3 billion check written to Amazon basically for this. We know there isn't. It was an incentive. And when you look at the math, and again, I'm not a math major, but it's $27 billion basically in revenues that were expected to come over a period of time. 25,000 jobs lost, average of 150,000. She calls them scraps, by the way.
They apparently didn't get my memo that I didn't want any video of Conal McShane in the show, or Charles Payne or David Asman. That memo didn't get through. But having said that, that was the guy who created, from the Jobs Creators Network, this billboard that's prominently displayed in New York's Times Square, reading 25,000 lost New York City jobs, $4 billion in lost wages, $12 billion in lost economic activity for New York. Thanks for nothing, AOC, obviously referring to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She welcomed that Amazon decided to bolt from the city because it said the $3 billion in tax credits that the company was getting were coming at the detriment of New Yorkers. Not everyone agrees with that, including this next guest, Republican New York City Minority Whip, Joe Borelli. Joe, what do you make of the reaction she had that this was really just paid for by billionaire-funded groups, that the Jobs Creators Network is really just that? You say what?
Neil, I wish the billboard was bigger. I mean, frankly, I'm not concerned with who the job network creators are and who their backers are, anything like that. The problem is that it's 100% accurate, Neil. There are 25,000 potential jobs that New Yorkers will not get. These are real jobs. These are careers. People like AOC, people like other Democratic politicians here in this city have spent hours, weeks, months, years trying to fight for minimum wage increases. This is a company that wanted to come and pay 4, 5, 6 times the minimum wage and really give New Yorkers a path out of poverty. I mean, this is something that it just fundamentally is so sad that someone could wear their naivety on their sleeve and be proud of it at the expense of real New York families.
You know what's interesting about it? I don't think the critics of Amazon ever thought in their wildest dreams that Amazon would just say, oh, the heck with it, we're not going to do it. So I don't think they were planning on that, and now they're trying to cover their heinies to say, all right, well, net, this is going to be better now because the $3 billion earmarked to help the company will actually go back to New Yorkers, when in fact that is not the case here.
Right, and that's part of the problem, is that she poisoned the well for New York residents to give them this idea that this 2.5 at the end of the day, some of that money could be actually be redirected, but $2.5 billion would go to addressing some of the real problems that people of this city face. I mean, it was wrong, it was incorrect, it was inaccurate, and she used that to justify why she was doing what she was doing. There's a real cost to be paid from not having Amazon here, and you're absolutely right. People wanted to see if Amazon would call the bluff, and they did, and they're gone, and now they have to live with that.
Joe, do you ever worry, though, that a lot of conservatives make her such an issue, that is, Congresswoman Cortez, that their anger isn't much different than the left's anger at the president, and that you can be so consumed with anger that you only help the person you're targeting?
Well, I don't think it's about being consumed with anger over AOC. I think it's about addressing the fact that she really is the one driving the message of the Democratic Party. I mean, she came out with the Green New Deal last month, and it was wildly absurd in some of its, fantasy ideas. And yet you saw all the Democratic nominees for president. I mean, people who we probably should be taking more seriously as politicians than AOC, but they all jumped on her lead and followed her in the bandwagon. I mean, this is who the media has chosen. And frankly, she has tried to assume this role. But this is who the Democrats have championing their message and basically establishing what their plan of attack is for the next 2 years.
But, there might be something what you say, because some of those prominent Democrats, including Senator Durbin in Illinois, are stepping back from a lot of her calls and a lot of her more, over-the-top spending plans. So it's as if they've either read polling data or other things that I'm not familiar with and say, we better dial this back. What did you make of that?
Well, sure. I think you saw some of the blowback from being as unrealistic as she was. I mean, someone like Cory Booker, someone like Elizabeth Warren, people who are progressives but have more of a grounding in policy, probably came to the conclusion that this was more fantasy than reality. It read sort of like my son's Christmas wish list, quite frankly. So I'm not surprised that they read the tea leaves and said that this is probably not a good thing. I mean, the same thing happened with Cory Booker now with Amazon, where he has come out and said Amazon would be welcome to come in New Jersey, and he's not wrong, frankly.
Yeah, we'll watch it closely. Joe, always good seeing you, my friend. Thank you.